I love reading in the comments when something I've shared has been a game changer for you. Seriously, nothing pleases me more. So today I want to share 5 different methods that have been absolute game changers for me on my crochet journey. The first major game changer that I want to talk about is when I learned how to create a single crochet border to improve the look of my blankets. Now this probably seems like such a lame game changer, but for me it was life-changing, and that's because I was a slave to the stitch count. If I had 50 stitches on the side, then I was going to put 50 single crochets on top of it, regardless of if it made it too wavy or too tight. When I realized that I could use single crochets to improve the look of my stitches, that's when everything changed for me. I focused more on how it looked to my eye rather than the stitch count. So here's a portion of a video that I did about crochet tips that explains in more detail what I'm talking about. For corners, I recommend doing 3 single crochets. That's going to get you nicely around the corner, as well as keep your stitch count even on both sides. Or you can try a single chain 2 single crochet into the corner instead. That's still going to keep your stitches even on both sides. That chain 2 is serving as a space. And then evenly work single crochets along the sides. If you're finding that it's getting too wavy, that means you've added too many single crochets and you need to go back and take some out. On the other hand, if it looks like it's pulling and getting too tight, you need to increase and add some extra single crochets. If you have a specific stitch count for your upcoming border, this is a time where you can fudge around with those single crochets to get that stitch count that you need. If you're working on something that has raw edges and you're not quite sure how many single crochets to add, take a look at the stitch that was used for that row and then use single crochets to match the height. Here's a general guide to get you started, but remember the most important thing is just to make it look as even and flat as possible. I also recommend that you check out this video where I talk about using slip stitches on the raw edges before you do your single crochet border. You're going to be amazed at what a difference that makes, so do check that out. Okay, so the next major game changer for me was when I learned about the invisible seam, otherwise known as the mattress stitch or the ladder stitch. I remember I was working on a blanket that had a ton of different colors involved, and I wanted a really beautiful flat seam join. And this was back several years ago where there weren't as many videos about this subject as there are now. This seam is like magic to me. You will not see it on either side. Okay, so go ahead and working into your first corner, go through the middle of your stitch. Doing the same thing in your next corner, just going into the middle. And like I said, this may not line up perfectly. You can always go back in and fix it later if you leave yourself a nice tail. This is pretty much a mattress stitch, and we're working it just in the centers of these stitches. You're just going to be going in a zigzag fashion all the way across. We've already worked these first 2 sides. I'm moving back to the front panel, going into the center. Okay, moving back to the back panel here. Doing my best to get into the center. You may find that you go into the threads or fibers of these stitches. Go ahead and do that. That's totally fine. That's why I like to have a sharp tip on my needle, because I want that. It helps to camouflage it even more. Just going back and forth. You want to feel a little bit of resistance. I've found it looks better if it does have resistance to it. If it goes in too easily, those are the ones that usually show up more. Just continue weaving back and forth. And we're coming to the end here. Okay, give it a nice pull. So as you can see, it looks pretty good. You can maybe see it a little bit here, but for the most part, that is pretty darn invisible to me, leaving a lovely flat seam on both sides. The magic knot. Oh, what a game changer that was for me. I had never found a knot that I could cut close to the knot itself without it coming apart. And still, this is the only one years later that I find is infallible. Now, I'm sure you already know how to do the magic knot, but have you ever tried doing the magic knot on the side of your work for color changes? This was another game changer for me. I'd never seen this before and it blew me away. And now we're just going to take that magic knot and apply it to the side here. So we're going to replace that tail by just joining a new color with the magic knot, eliminating that tail altogether. Our goal is to finish that very last stitch with the new color. So we want that knot to kind of settle right around here. So with that last stitch still in place, I'm going to take and clip right underneath. And now I'm going to backtrack and just pull that yarn out and remove one stitch. There's our next to last stitch. We have one stitch to finish our row. I'm just going to take a stitch marker to keep that stitch in place. And now we're going to do the very same thing. We're going to attach this tail to the new yarn and this tail to the old yarn. Remember, just tying like a shoelace. And pull that close. So I tied the new yarn to the old, and now the old to the new. So now we're going to take the base of the old yarn, that's really close to that stitch marker there, and the new, and pull those strands together to form our knot. Finish your last stitch and bring in that new color. And there's your knot. You'll have a tiny little knot here on the side, but you can absolutely cover that with your foundation border. This is a color changing technique that I discovered fairly recently that I am still madly in love with. Now, it's very similar to the classic color changing that you're probably more familiar with. The only difference is the timing of when you do the color change. You just go straight in with your color change when you need it. This little tweak has reduced so much stress for me with color changes, I cannot tell you. To do this color change really easy, you would just complete your stitches as you normally would. You don't have to think about when you need to change color until you actually do. You can complete that previous stitch. And when you're ready to change color, just give yourself a little bit of a loop, remove your hook, insert your hook into the front loop and this little sidebar here. Pull your yarn through. And you can either complete the stitch now or you can get rid of this loop here just by pulling on the strand. And continue on, making your stitch. And that's all there is to that. Now, what if you want to do it on the side? Complete your last stitch, remove your hook from the loop, going into the front loop and that sidebar there, pull your new color through, pull on the old color, and continue on. And what about half double crochets and singles? Yes, it works for those as well. Let's go ahead and do a half double crochet. The only difference here is you're going to go through these 3 bands of yarn. Okay, bring in the new color, pull it through, create your stitch, pull on the old one, and you're ready to go. single crochet. Let's do a change for that. Remove your hook, and just in these 2 bars here, pull the yarn through. You can create your next stitch, or you can pull on that strand, whichever order you want to do it in. And you're good to go again. And finally, let's talk about a multicolored granny square with only one end to weave in. Now, I really don't mind weaving in tails, but I still love it when I can find ways to cut them down, literally. This video shares a really interesting way of tying your ends together in the corners so they won't come out. So by the time you're finished, you only have one end to weave in. Snip your yarn, making a decent sized tail, then make a slip knot by pulling the end through the center of the loop and tighten. You have 2 options here. You can either make a reversible square, or you can work all of your rounds on the same side. But your goal here for both of these methods is to start your round in a corner. So if you want to do a reversible square, flip your square to the other side now, and you're all set to fasten on. If you want to stay on the same side, then weave your tail across to a corner space, and then you're ready. Now bring in your new color and pull the tail through the corner space. Make a double knot, making sure that the tail from the previous color is sitting within it. This is the key point and success with the technique. Now grab your hook and pull the working yarn through the space, and then make a chain 2 or 3 to serve as your first double crochet. Work your corner clusters as you normally would, making sure to work over the 2 tails as you do. As you can see, the clusters help to hold the tails in place as well as give them a great place to hide. When you reach the end, slip stitch into the first stitch to complete the round, and then again fasten off with a slip knot to secure your tail. Snip the 2 tails and you're ready for round 3. Again, your goal here is to start in your nearest corner, so using your crochet hook, weave your yarn end through the top of the stitches to get to the corner space. Now flip your work if you're making a reversible square, or stay where you are if you're working on the same side. Bring in your new color and pull the end through and tie a double knot, making sure to include the tail from the previous round. Scoot things around a little bit to get into a good spot on the corner. Pull the yarn through with your crochet hook and then create a chain 2 or 3 to begin your first cluster. And then just work your corner clusters as normal. You'll have to play around a little bit with the positioning of your clusters depending on the placement of your knot, but once you've done a couple of these, you'll find that sweet spot. And that's really all there is to it. You're just going to continue repeating round 3 until you reach the size of the square that you want to make. Then when you reach your final round, you'll be left with only one tail to weave in. And I like to do the rule of 3 technique, where I just make sure to weave in the tail going in 3 different directions. This too will ensure that that tail won't come out. So those are my 5 top personal game changers. I would love to know what have been game changers for you on your crochet journey. Is it a particular stitch, method, philosophy? I know we'd all love to hear about it and learn from it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.